A warm welcome to you. I am pleased to be speaking to you again in this four-part webinar to share with you, as architects and visualizers, a few aspects of my work as an architect and an architectural photographer, because in many aspects, the disciplines of photographic, modeled, and visualized architectural representation overlap. As part as Enscape's, excuse me, in Vision 21 last year, I gave a talk in which I addressed a number of issues. The gratifying response has prompted us to explore some topics further. I cordially invite you to attend Rendering is like Photography, applying the principles of architectural photography to your renderings. Part 3 of 4, Opponents and Allies. Opponents can be allies. My name is Aryan Mirfendereski, and I'm an architect. During my work as a research assistant and lecturer at the chair of computer-aided architectural design and the chair of building technology, the focus of my activities was, on the one hand, on individual research projects, and on the other hand, on the conception and implementation of teaching formats in the diploma, bachelor's, and master's degree programs. My teaching included raising awareness of team understanding and the formation of team structures, drawing in 2 and 3 dimensional space, the visualization of the same, and photographic and cinematic representation using digital techniques. Over time, I have defined architectural representation as the focal point of my part-time work as a photographer. After a fulfilling period of study and subsequent research and teaching, I decided to devote myself to photography full time with a focus on architectural documentation, whereby I keep an eye on the entire process from the planners, the design, and the construction documentation to the finished object and its use. In this session, I would like to make you aware of aspects of photography that you can use to enhance the quality of your architectural visualizations, because one thing is quite clear: rendering is like photography. Just because my ingredients are all organic and I use professional pots and pans for cooking and frying does not mean that my food tastes good. Having does not mean knowing. Knowing is a comprehensive knowledge and consideration. To be able to convey the complexity of my thoughts when designing and of my perception when photographing, it takes more than pure technology. Technology has always been and still is only a tool. How I use it, for what and to what extent, is just as decisive for the visualizer as it is for the photographer, as it is for the chef, as anyone else who wants to get the best out of their product with their technology. So let's not necessarily talk about the technology, but rather about the power of the thoughts that you put into a project and the means you have at your disposal to communicate those thoughts. Let's talk about the visual language, about the readability of a picture, about the aesthetic effect and its laws, about stylistic means, which you in turn can use with the help of your technology to let the viewers of your work actually see what you want them to see. We have already talked about the eye of the photographer and the photographer's camera and lenses. Those videos can be found on the Enscape website and on YouTube if you're interested. In the following 2 webinars, we will cover opponents and allies. Opponents can be allies. And the 4th part will be an Enscape case study. So let's get started with the 3rd of 4 sessions. Opponents and allies. Opponents can be allies. Let's talk about things which I have to plan laboriously and still hope for luck, partly, but still powerless to do. Things that you, as a modeler and visualizer, have all the power of the software to deal with. The light, against all trades, architectural digest, and the post-production. So let's start with the most important. Of course, images are shown that you have already encountered in the course of this series. Since we want to discuss all relevant aspects of a photo, starting with the story, over the emotions, as well as technical aspects, it only makes sense that at this point that we also want to talk about the light for some images which are already you're already familiar with. Here we see a canopy in front of a building at blue hour. The building part illuminates itself. The pastel orange of the artificial light and the pastel blue of the sky work very nicely together as complementary contrasting colors. In this situation, the low winter sun shines through a thin, homogeneous cloud cover and thus shines on the building as if through an enormously large softbox positioned far away, which ensures that no hard, recognizable shadows fall. The students leaving the school ground fit well with the dreary light situation on this gray day. It's summer, the sun is high, it shines straight on the building. The resulting shadows create a good sense of architectural depth. There are no clouds in the sky. What a bright day. Some children are playing exuberantly in the schoolyard. Some others are using the canopy for what it is intended for, among other things, as a sunshade. It is only here that one recognizes as an outsider what kind of context we're dealing with here. The light and the associated behavior of the users brings the story of this architecture to the point. Here, the soft light through a slightly overcast sky plays into my cards. There are no dominant shadows, not even between the colored slats, which could unnecessarily distract. Likewise, in this situation, here you can even still clearly read the inner life through the openings in the architecture. The warm evening light at the beginning of the golden hour is, of course, very helpful to create a cozy and homely feeling in the viewer. Again, the soft light of a soft box, the enormously large distant sun behind a thin blanket of clouds, it makes the building shell appear as what it is meant to be, a reflective plane that reproduces the surroundings and thereby withdraws itself and the building. But when it gets dark outside and the lights in the pavilion are turned on, the game turns completely around. The self-illuminating game again. In complementary contrast to the sky during the blue hour, the orange artificial light glows all the more. In photography, people always talk about making something appear in the best light. But which is the best light? The photographer or the visualizer must first decide. Although the best is a superlative, it is not said that there is only one best. You just have to think about what you want to tell. The radiant, direct sunlight on this yet unspectacular, perhaps even boring building, due to its very simple geometry, there are not even noticeable shadows, which would not be unusual for this light. However, the advantage is that the now white glowing building stands out strongly against the sky and the surroundings. A similar situation here, but since this is a building extension, excuse me, I decided to shoot the photo at a time of day when the harsh sunlight does not fall directly on the extensions, but on the renovated main building. Hereby, I wanted to represent the extensions as a self-evident part of the complex and not to emphasize it again with the light in addition to the dark color of the material. It is the hard sunlight that emphasizes cubic shapes in their geometry and creates optical depth. As a backlight, it can create an unusual play between light and shadow and describe depth with the help of silhouettes thus created. We already talked about this image in the first part of this series. The silhouette effect and the play between the sky, the clouds, and the colors. This photo works so well because we don't even need to see the buildings closely to recognize them. They are famous. The black silhouettes are enough for us to remember them. The silhouette of a skyline during the dawn, tranquility reigns in a metropolis, versus the self-illuminating silhouette of the same skyline after dusk, two completely different stories. Sometimes in architectural photography, an indirect, invisible backlight is enough to tell darker spaces without the use of artificial lighting. Sometimes you are lucky enough to find large window openings through which the bright light of a low winter sun shines in and fills the whole room. And sometimes there are optimal natural lighting conditions from two vertical sides and the ceiling so that the room is perfectly illuminated. The third example in a row for which the use of artificial light sources, such as ceiling lamps, was not necessary. The hanging lamps are only for optics and not to illuminate the room. They are not enough for this purpose. The ceiling lamps should remain switched off. It took hours for the sunlight to finally find its way in through the glass panes to turn the tables of the restaurant into a cozy place and make individual pieces of furniture and decoration, such as the golden ball in the left part of the background, glow or even shine. The same room. The same room, but with backlighting and the resulting silhouettes, you give the viewer a view of the terrace. And the same technique, only with an open aperture at dusk. This is no longer about the restaurant, but about the mood at the table. The direct sunlight casts very clear and sharp shadows. These once again highlight the architecture of this building. The shadow cast by the superstructure on the base floor develops curved along the curved facade. The light falling down from above through the concrete ridges not only produces very beautiful reflections on the smooth tiles setting of the segments of the level, it also shows in the depth of the picture the recurring element of the ascent and the descents to the tracks of the station. This photo would have worked even without the cars. The hall is fascinating enough for that, but daylight falling through such an imposing ceiling opening on La Déesse, the goddess, gives the photographer all the more pleasure. Now, with the help of the last three photographs, we have talked not only about certain types, directions, and qualities of light, but explicitly about a use for highlighting certain qualities of architecture. Let's look at a simple example in a simple object. In this house, the stairwell is in the center of the footprint. It is thus always quite dark. To brighten up the staircase from the ground floor to the first floor, the architectural office came up with a simple and effective thing. Compared to the closed staircase we see here, the upper staircase is open, so there are no rises. The light streaming in from the skylight above the staircase falls on and between the steps over a certain period of the day, illuminating the staircase between the ground floor and the first floor. If you had the opportunity to emphasize such qualities with a targeted use of light to show them to the viewer of your visualization, you would do it, wouldn't you? A long corridor in a monastery, which ends with a light-giving window. The glowing light bulb on the ceiling does not do any good to the depth of the corridor in in the photo. It is much better this way. But now the protagonist appears. She turns on the light, notices me, and stops. The depth of the corridor works better without the burning light bulb, but now I have a story with one of the last 5 Salvatorian sisters still alive. Alone with one of these ugly light bulbs, you can tell so much. A visualization by Cologne-based Arab architects. A soft light and the shadow of trees fall on the facade. Opposite trees are reflected in the glass pane. The light sources in the interior, formed in stripes, segment the space into units of use. Luxigon visualizes here a concert hall in Munich for Barozzi Vega. Light and shadow are very clearly told here, where it literally falls in, where it shines through, what it falls on, and what it is reflected by and reflected on. Luxigon, again, the tower in Sydney for Henning Larsen, showing the use of natural and artificial light is a given here. And when I plan a spacious atrium that is open to light from above, I also let light stream in from above in the visualization, of course. A vintage kitchen, which I found on behance.net, visualized by artist Alexander Bortnitsky and Eugen Gripinski from Ukraine and Belarus. It's a nice kitchen. That's it. But then both gentlemen take away the soft cloud cover and turn up the sun, and through a simple architectural element of a light transmitting shell, a play of light and shadow is created all over the kitchen. What a beautiful before and after example. In summary, I would like to leave you with the following. As architects, modelers, and visualizers, we have all the power in the world, let's say all the power of your software bundles when it comes to implementing your work. Having all the power is merely a fine thing if you are aware of what you're doing. Visualizing doesn't stop with modeling and setting up a scene. Visualizing means simulating light. Think about your light in terms of your architecture. What can my architecture do with what kind of light? What kind of light do I need? How much of it? Where does it come from? What does it fall on? Against all trades, or even can you fix it in Photoshop? Or also, how do I make Aryan go insane? Why I love construction documentaries has to do with the fact that this type of architectural photography comes closest to reportage. I don't clear anything away, I don't move anything, I don't sort anything. Things are the way things are, a status quo. In a special way, the mostly empty, bare and dirty rooms nevertheless tell a little story. The difficulties in photographing emerge only after completion. Aryan, the house is not yet finished, but one apartment has already been completed. Tomorrow morning it will be cleaned. Tomorrow afternoon the tenant will move in. Could you come at noon to take pictures? Sure. While I was adjusting my camera for this photo, a plumber came out of the dirty stairwell and walked to the bathroom to check a connection. It would have been more efficient to mop the bathroom again, but I didn't have a mop with me. Since then, however, I know that depending on the client and on the project, a mop belongs to the basic equipment of an architectural photographer. It took me half an hour to digitally retouch his footprints. Still not as clean as after mopping, but hey, it's just a bathroom. Aryan, could you please remove the covers at the stairs? On the right side? Sure. And please, the exceeding wall on the left entrance. So why is it exceeding? I don't know. I didn't plan that. The construction supervisor did that. Dear audience, I know you only model what you want to visualize. But sometimes the difference between photographs of unfurnished and too clean rooms and a certain style of visualization is only small details that show the user that these rooms are also habitable. The tenant of this apartment should already see that there are sockets and light switches, even if there are no more bare cables coming out of the ceiling on which they can mount their lamps. Even if they are sometimes simple profit buildings, do not make the architecture in the pictures even colder than they sometimes already are. The architect of this building was saddened by not getting the photos of the building from the state of his renderings. Some decisions on the construction site made the design look different in the end. In addition, the tenants had already moved in. Shutters, plants, clothes lines, and a stepper are now components of the street view. The tiles in the entrance area were also not what he wanted, but what the builder wanted. Now it's again architecture without the users, but of course I can understand his desire. Of course, you want to present your design. Of course, you want to show clear shapes. Of course, shutters are ugly. But the modeling and visualization is not done with the creation of the curvature. What about its use? What about the usability? As a visualizer, with all the power of your software, you will surely find the fine line between naked architecture and user architecture. Again, think about the story you want to tell. To summarize, that not the word vision is in visualization, but the vision is what you want to sell to the non-professional. And there is more to a vision than a pure building volume. Architectural Digest. What you should always keep in mind as soon as you enter a furnished interior is that both the furniture and the fixed installations are part of the whole. And therefore, in terms of creating a good photo, there are also subjects to the rules we know by now, starting with the story through the technical aspects of the camera and lenses, but above all, individual elements are subject to rules regarding position, alignment, orientation, cropping, and composition. All the furniture and decorative elements that I didn't want to include in the photo are behind the back left wall, behind the kitchen, and behind myself. And as I move and turn in space, I must always be mindful that these elements do not come into view, just as I have to make sure that the individual elements of the photo still appear standalone and tidy in the changed perspective. However, with the bobby car next to the oldtimer in the garage, I left a little hint that this is the house of a family with children. In this house lives a family of four. The interior could not match with the beauty of the spiral staircase, kitchen, and floor. We have cleared away all the household goods of a family of four. I just didn't feel like taking down the lamp in the background. But just as we moved with the camera, we always had to move the entire household. Don't get me wrong, I am not against furniture, nor too much furniture and decorative elements. They just should not overload the composition of the picture, but rather support it. The furniture itself is, of course, a matter of taste, and this goes hand in hand with cultural needs. Recently, I saw a visualization of a living room and spontaneously thought to myself, how cluttered. For my taste, mismatched furniture, too glossy tiles, too many different materials, and colorful LED stripes everywhere. It looked like my cousin's house in Iran. Then I realized it was a rendering of an Iranian architect designing a house for an Iranian family in Iran. And that's when I thought to myself, perfect. I absolutely do not like it because of my trained housing culture, but it is perfect. Unfortunately, I missed to download the picture. Just as the neon lights on the ceiling leave the picture in the top two corners, I arranged the tables to repeat the same play on the floor, bringing balance into the picture. It becomes more difficult when the inventory piles up. All the more care must be taken that all the elements, not only the chairs and tables, but also the covering of these, are located in some kind of grid of the walls, and there are openings or in thirds of quarters of the picture so that the overall impression remains a tidy one. Especially in scenes overloaded with furniture, strict order is needed to keep the balance, even when movement or even chaos comes into play. It is a family house. This includes not only the appropriate furniture, but also curtains, pictures on the wall, drawings of the children, and board games in the closet. These are the details with which you convey your vision in your visualization. This magnetic wall was designed by the architect exclusively for the children. He had also populated it with children's pictures in his renderings. The clients were thrilled. The wall was accepted and used by the children. Perfect. A small example of how users can be used to communicate how things work in the image, decently and simply. This architectural firm specializes in family and group projects. And I believe that you can see this character of community well reflected in the buildings, in the use and in the functioning. In the interaction of the building with the residents and the residents with the building. If one now remains strict in the composition and has a little patience with the position of the sun and the associated shadow cast in its angle, have a look at the balcony and the sunshades, then one manages to bring order into it here as well. To summarize, if the cropping is set, the composition works, the layout supports it, and you know what you want to tell, then it's a simple matter of using additional elements to tell your story. And it's not a question of less or more, or less is more, or the more should be less. It is a question of the usefulness of the architecture and the uses of the architecture and the cultural background. I imagine what kind of photo this would have turned out to be if I had to photograph it again just before the tenant moved in. An unfurnished, unused, and lifeless space in the form of a kitchen. The post-production. Why do photographers always shoot raw? To keep it not technical, but descriptive. There are certainly many reasons to buy good meat raw. One of these reasons is that it is raw. So it is up to you, in so far as you like meat, to do what you like with that piece of meat. Marinate or not marinate, the pickling time, to the seasoning, the temperature of the preparation, the choice of heat source, to the preparation time, and the fine tuning. meatballs. We call them lecker Fleischbällchen. When you buy a ready-to-eat meatball from the butcher of your choice, you can be sure that it will meet your requirements of quality and taste. But one thing you won't have: a meatball vision. The meatball gives no scope for vision. Someone else had the vision and cut up the meat for you, seasoned it, rolled it, fried it. At most, you can still decide on ketchup or mustard. The meatball is our JPEG. With regard to all the information that an image file contains, it has already been compressed in your camera by your manufacturer's software according to their standards. A JPEG has countless advantages, but it doesn't leave much room for vision on a professional level. This is the picture how the client saw his project. This picture shows how I saw the project on site. And this picture shows how my camera saw the project on site. A lot has happened without significantly losing quality. Again, what the client wanted to see, what I saw, what my camera saw. You don't necessarily pull raw material from your visualization software. This means that you have to be careful with your images in the image editing software of your choice, because a compressed image file simply doesn't offer an enormous amount of editing latitude without it showing in the image. But one thing is clear: as good, as precise, and full of love as you should be in modeling and visualizing, this kind of software is not made for getting colors, sharpness, depth, heights, and much more to the point. And I'm really just talking about easy image editing here, not manipulation work. I never liked this picture. I already didn't like this photo when I set up my tripod. You can see that in the photo. I was uninspired, but I knew I would regret it if I just moved on, because something interesting is in the picture. However, I didn't discuss that until later, sitting at the screen. The same with this. The charming place where I used to live at the time. It's little things that can once again set the scene for a motive in raw data processing. With the right color adjustment and the slight vignette, you do this building some good. Before that, it's already fine. But after that, it's quite a bit more precise and better. Before and after adjustments. To sum up, post-processing an image always brings something good with it. The software you use for your visualization work is professionally designed for your visualization work. To communicate the right colors, to work out highlights, to align lines once again, and to work on the sharpness and so on. There are other professional tools, and with the thoughtful use of these, you bring your results on once again to another level. This was my contribution to Opponents and Allies. And I'm looking forward to our last part of this series, an Enscape case study with Norbert Gräser of Enscape. Together we will walk step by step from model to visualization. And if you have any questions about the contents of this part, please send me an email to the address shown until the 23rd of March. I look forward to your questions, and I would answer all of them at the beginning of the fourth session. Thank you very much for your precious time, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.